Well, hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be replacing the Freehub body on my wheel here. This is a Prime carbon rear wheel, and I noticed cleaning it recently or something that the bearings weren't spinning very smooth. So I know you can't feel that, but it feels kind of rough. There's a couple spots where it clunks a little bit. So I did a little troubleshooting and found that it's not the hub bearings, but the bearings in the Freehub body itself that are kind of clunky. So those of you who don't know, there are two sets of bearings in the rear wheel. There are one set on each side of the hub to support the weight of the wheel. And those go around, they look kind of like this here. That's a wheel bearing. And so there's one on each side of the hub, and then there's also another pair on each side of the cassette, or the Freehub body under the cassette, to support the loading of the cassette there. So I went ahead and got a new Freehub body. So first I was just going to replace the bearings, but the guys at the shop said, hey, you know, you can just buy a new Freehub, and along with brand new bearings, which are already pressed in there, one on each side, you can see on the side there. You also get, you know, brand new pawls, you get a brand new Freehub body, because this is kind of chewed up by your cassette. And so that's what we're going to do. By the way, this is the bag it came in. If you're looking for part numbers, it is, I don't know if you can see that, RD010. Or actually it also says RO10 Freehub body. There you go. Get that from Chain Reaction Cycles, who distributes Prime wheels. So, pretty simple thing to do. Just need a couple of tools, cassette lock ring remover, the new hub itself, obviously, and some new grease. I got some Park Tool high performance grease. It's kind of pricey. It's like 13 or 15 bucks for this tube, but I like it because it has a kind of a pointy nozzle and you can squirt it into places more easily, and plus you don't go through a lot of this, so that'll probably last 10 years, so no big deal. So the procedure is to take off the cassette, which is simply undo the lock ring, pull the cassette off, and then then we can access the Freehub body, and this simply slides off, and then we put the new one on and we're all set. So I'm going to go through the whole process with you, and you can see how it goes. So what happens is, if you get some water in there, you're supposed to service as in lube and take it apart every, I don't know, every so often they say. But who does that? Who takes apart their cassette and lubes the Freehub body? I don't. I'm probably going to do it now because I found out what the issues were if you don't. It kind of locked it up. So what I think happened was I bought this wheel set used, and the guy probably rode it in the rain or he washed it or something, and some water sat in there, and it got kind of seized onto the axle itself, so it was actually really hard to get it off the first time. I did put it back on, but I lubed it all up, so it'll come off pretty easy this time. But what happens was those bearings get seized in there, and then they get all clunky, and you get rust and flat spots, and so I'm going to put a brand new one on. And this part here, by the way, for instance, it was only 30 or 35 bucks, so I thought it was a pretty good deal. You get brand new bearings, like I said, whole new Freehub body, nice and clean, so that's going to be awesome. So let's go ahead and get to work. Set that to the side. Now, engage that in there. You can use a chain whip if you have one, but I don't, so I just wrap a rag around here. And usually I can get it to come off. I have to lay it down there for a second, get some extra leverage on it, but there we go, get that loosened up. That is your lock ring, so that comes off. Set that to the side. Now if you're careful, you can take the whole cassette off as one piece, because these are individual little gears, at least the first 4 or 5 or so. So if you can take the whole thing off, set it to the side, then you don't have to individually put them back on. So let's see if I can do that successfully. There we go, so we got the cassette. It's multiple pieces, but right now it's just one, so when I put the new one on, I can slide it on there and not have to deal with that. Set that to the side. So now we have access to the Freehub, so you can see, since the Freehub body is aluminum, it gets kind of chewed up. Looks like I got some water, and I threw it yesterday in the rain, actually, so you can see there's a little bit of water in there, again, which is the cause of the problem in the first place. So this is why you take it apart and lube it every once in a while. So you can see the cassette chews up the Freehub body, so it's good to put a new one on every once in a while. Get a nice clean one on here. So now that we have access to this, then we just have to open these up, and these will come out. Then we can pull the Freehub body off, and you'll be able to see the axle as well. So and that's simply with a couple of 5mm hex wrenches. This wheel's actually really easy to take apart. You just put one hex wrench on each side. Also got one on the other side here. And that, let's see, which one did that do? That loosened up the far side. So this comes off. It's just a little nut. This is the actual axle itself. This is a little spacer. Take that off, set it to the side. And there's also, be careful not to lose any of these parts because these are very important. Each one of them, there's a little tiny spacer there and stuff. So I'm going to take this, carefully set that to the side. So there's one of the hub bearings in there. So there's one on each side of the hub, like I mentioned, one there, one there. And there's two on the opposite side for the Freehub. So now we have access to this one. This is a big old 10mm hex. And put this in there and loosen up the other side. So this side comes off. Threads off the axle. So there's the axle, here's the Freehub. Dry that off. Now we took those two off, you can see here's the axle in the center there. And now you just simply slide the Freehub body out. Here it comes. And there we go. So there's the old Freehub. This is a spacer that needs to stay in there, don't lose that. That goes inside of there. So here's the old one. And I know it's impossible for you to feel this, but this is super smooth. No clunks, no grinding. Therefore, we know that the hub bearings are in good shape. But if I do the same with this one, if I kind of put my finger in there, grab one of the bearings and twist it around, you can feel, well, I can feel it's kind of clunky and grindy. So that's how I know that these bearings are shot and need to be replaced. So there's the old one. I'm going to set this to the side. Don't need that anymore. And voila, brand new one. So it comes with a little spacer ring here. This is if you have a 8, 9, or 10 speed cassette, you need to put that on. I have 11 speed, so this comes off because 11 speeds take up more space, so they don't need this. So a couple cool features about this Freehub. One, it has a grease port right there under that set screw. Let's see if I can point to it here. So under this set screw here, there's a little port, so you can inject grease in there. Now look at grease up to the two insides of the bearings. Here's one of the bearings here. There's the other bearing inside of there, and then there's the aluminum spacer. So now that we got this, all we have to do is grease it up, basically, and put it in. These bearings are super smooth and nice. So I'm excited to see how it feels with brand new bearings. So all we have to do is simply get some grease on it, pop it back in, put the cassette on, and we are ready to roll. Let's get yourself a nice grease. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is open up this little grease port here and try and get some grease to the inside of the bearings. So you gotta be real careful. This is a super tiny little screw here. Threads. Whoa. There's the tiny little guy. Set that somewhere safe. And now I'm going to see if I can squirt some grease in there. I happen to have a grease gun, which you may have seen in my previous video. I'm just going to use this to squirt it in there because it's kind of hard to get in there with that big tube. So I'll get some started here. There we go. I'll just inject a little bit into there. That's probably good. Just to give it some to displace the water if any water gets inside of there. I inject a little bit of grease in there, you can see it. So that should be good for there. So if you don't have a grease gun, you just do your best to kind of squirt a little bit of grease in there if you can. Or maybe you don't need to do it at all, really, because it's behind the sealed area, so shouldn't get too much water in there anyway. So now the tricky part is to get this tiny little set screw back in. Carefully thread it back in. Make sure it's flush or lower than the adjacent surface so the cassette doesn't hang up on it. There we go, that's perfect. Nice and smooth. Okay, next I'm just going to squirt some grease just along the bearings just to get some grease on the inside there. Hard to see what I'm doing, but I'm just squirting it along the edge of that bearing in there. There we go. I don't know if you can see it in there. I squirted some in there. I'm just going to use my finger to kind of mush it around. And the bearings come greased, obviously. You don't need to put it in the bearing itself. Just you want to put it around the outside just to displace any water that might get in there. As you know, oil and water don't mix, so if any water does get in here, water or this oil or grease will kind of repel it and keep it from getting inside the bearing itself. So squirt a bunch on that side. I'm doing the same for the other side, just right here. A little bit along this edge. Same thing, just kind of mush it around with your finger. Make sure everything's nice and coated. Then of course you want to grease the pawls because this is a running surface. Or you can do the inside of the hub itself. I'll probably do both just to make sure there's enough grease everywhere. Doesn't hurt to put a little extra on. There we go, that looks pretty good as far as the Freehub body goes. I'm going to put a little extra. You can actually see inside of here kind of a brownish tinge. That was from the previous owner not cleaning this out after a rain ride or something, and it got a little rusty, so that's what caused the problem in the first place. So now I got a lot of grease in here, so should not happen again. Just gonna put a little extra on this ratcheting surface here. I'll just squirt a bunch in here and then rub it around with my finger. So I'm gonna put a lot on that ratcheting surface in there because that's what makes the click 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 sound, and obviously the click 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 is the metal on metal. The little pawls ratcheting against that surface there, so that's nicely greased. Okay, now they got the pawls greased, bearings greased, everybody's greased and happy. All I have to do is simply do the reverse order of taking it apart. Just slide it over, make sure that the spacer's in here if you have this kind of hub. That guy right there. And then all I have to do, carefully slide it back in, kind of rock it around a little bit to get the seat in there. And then if you rotate it slightly in the direction of freewheel, it'll go in a little easier. There we go. I can hear the clicking. And now it feels super smooth. That's way better. Oh yeah. So interestingly, this won't help when you're actually pedaling because the hub is moving with the wheel when you're pedaling, so it's just relying on the hub bearings. But when you start freewheeling, that's when obviously this starts rotating against the bearings there, and that's what the issue was. So now that that's good, all we have to do is put it back together and go on a ride. So so this guy goes on this side. Like I said, this is really easy to get this hub taken apart. I was really happy with it. That goes on that side, and on this side we have, make sure you have all your little spacers and everything, those are very important. That goes on first. Actually tightening on the opposite side now. Just snug enough. Tighten it up snug, make sure it still moves smoothly. Still feels smooth. You're good to go. I'll put this one on this side. Grab your wrench. Tighten it up, and you're all set. There you go, feels much smoother. Wish you could feel it, but you can't, but that's way smoother. Alright, so there you go. Freehub has been replaced. Got a nice, clean, new one on there. Fresh bearings, all greased up, ready to ride. All I have to do now is put the cassette back on. I won't bore you with that, because that's pretty straightforward. Hope you learned a little bit by watching this, about how to simply replace your Freehub, and also to maintain these bearings. It's important to maintain bearings, because you always get water in there. If you do go on a rain ride, it's be good to take off your cassette. At least get some lube, make sure there's no standing water in there. Lube it up, and put it back on. So, thanks for watching this one. Hope you learned a little bit about that Freehub bearing replacement. And, as always, thanks for watching, and go out there and enjoy your ride.